So before we start a story, I want to give a little pretext about semiconductor production to everyone. So there are two major areas in semiconductor production. The first is semiconductor design and the second is semiconductor manufacturing. And these two departments usually work independent of each other. So let us take a quick example to understand this. The Android devices that we majorly use. So Android devices use a Snapdragon processor chip. Now, this Snapdragon processor chip, it's designed by Qualcomm. Qualcomm is a tech company which designs these Snapdragon chips, and once the design is finalized, Qualcomm hands over the design to a semiconductor manufacturing company like TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. So then TSMC takes those designs and manufactures the actual semiconductor. And once the semiconductor is manufactured, TSMC hands over the final semiconductor product to the mobile device companies like OnePlus or Redmi. And these mobile device companies use those Snapdragon chips in their mobile devices, and they roll out the mobile devices into the market, customers buy it, and the usual process follows. So the basic flow over here is first the semiconductor design company, then the semiconductor manufacturing company, and then the mobile device company. So like we have already covered the pretext here. So let's get back to our story. And for this, let us rewind to 2007. So what happened in 2007 is Apple launched its first iPhone. Now, it was a revolutionary mobile device. It was one of its kind, but it had some of its shortcomings. Like it had short battery life, it had slow internet, no front camera, and most importantly, it was not a powerful mobile device in itself. Like it could not accommodate a lot of the applications. So, and one of the main reasons why these shortcomings existed, it was because the components that were used inside the Apple mobile phone, they came from different sources. Like one of the component that was used inside the first iPhone, it came from a DVD player of Samsung. So you can imagine the kind of mismatch of components that happen inside the Apple iPhone. Now, Steve Jobs, Apple's co-founder, he was aware of these shortcomings, and he was also aware of the reason why these shortcomings existed, about the mismatch. And Steve Jobs himself had a vision for the Apple company that he wanted the Apple products to be unique in the market. He wanted the Apple products to stand out amongst all its competitors. So he started brainstorming ideas like what they could do that could make their products unique, or what they could do that could help the Apple to stand out amongst its competitors. And while they were brainstorming ideas, they somehow stumbled upon this idea like, what if Apple designed its own chips? Like, what if Apple designed customized chips that were only specifically designed for Apple products? Now, this was an unconventional idea. It was totally an out of a box idea, and no other company even thought of doing so. And so, in this part of the story, a very important person enters, and his name is Mr. Johnny. So Mr. Johnny is a semiconductor engineer by profession, and back then he was working in some other firm. So Apple hired Mr. Johnny into their own company, and Mr. Johnny was brought on board, and Apple discussed this idea with him. So Mr. Johnny, coming from a semiconductor background, had a lot of knowledge and expertise in this field, and he understood the company's vision, like what the company was expecting and why they wanted to design their own chips and everything. So now, when Mr. Johnny was understanding all these ideas and the vision of the company, he realized how risky and challenging it could be. Like designing a chip from scratch is a challenging process in itself. And usually, what happens is when we use our mobile devices, we use Android operating system or iOS. So, whenever there is a bug in the software system, the Android company sends us a software update. We download that software update, and whatever the bug existed, it gets fixed and a device starts running smoothly. But in the case of hardware, fixing a bug or fixing a component of the chip, it's not that easy. And Mr. Johnny realized this part, that even if a tiny part of the chip fails, the entire device could be compromised. So he understood the challenges of this project, but at the same time, Mr. Johnny understood that if somehow they are able to crack this down, if somehow they're able to do this, they'll be able to change the market forever. Like this could be a game changer for them. So over the next few years, Mr. Johnny got back to work and he started working on this unconventional idea for designing customized chips for Apple products. And finally came the year 2013. So in 2013, Apple released their A7 chips. Now, A7 chips were the first smartphone chips with 64-bit architecture. What it means is that it was a desktop class architecture in a super slim phone. And you can understand, you can imagine that this made the iPhone significantly faster, and this enabled iPhone to accommodate all kinds of features and functionalities in it. And this innovation was so impactful, like iPhone was able to do those things which other phone devices could not even think of. And so this innovation made all the other mobile device companies to rethink their strategy just to keep up with Apple, because Apple was growing so fast because of this innovation. And so this unconventional decision to design their own chips truly transformed the mobile device industry for Apple. And Mr. Johnny was the person who made this all into a reality. Now, the reason why we have chosen this particular story to share with you all today is because we wanted to highlight two things. First is the power of knowledge, and second is the impact of unconventional choices. Now, Mr. Johnny's expertise in semiconductors allowed an entire company, the Apple company, to revolutionize an entire market, the smartphone market. But also, it was not just his knowledge, it was also his willingness to work on an unconventional idea. He welcomed that unconventional idea and out of the box idea with welcoming arms, and he worked on it. He believed in it, even though it was not a common practice at that time. And I think at this point, I should mention that at present, Mr. Johnny is the Senior Vice President of Apple's Hardware Technologies. And since we're talking about Apple, I think it's worth noting that Apple's CEO, Mr. Tim Cook, is an industrial engineer himself. And Mr. Tim Cook's knowledge and expertise has helped Apple to grow its company's market value significantly. And I think that's a story for another time. So let's not get into it right now. So coming back to our original story about Mr. Johnny and the customized chips and the Apple company, what do we learn from it? Sometimes in life, we have to take decisions that may be unconventional, that may be out of the box and nobody else is doing it. But we have to realize that those are the only decisions that will set us apart in this competitive world. And this brings us to our conclusion over here that a career in semiconductors, like Mr. Johnny has, or a career in industrial engineering, like Mr. Tim Cook has, these career fields hold immense potential, not just to transform your own future, but entire humanity, an entire global population. So, and Taiwan can offer you just the right environment to make this all a reality. Now, especially when the trend for like most of the Indian students is to choose a Western country for their higher studies, take the courage to make an unconventional choice of choosing Taiwan and see for yourself how that transforms your life, how that transforms your career. And as we begin today's webinar, let's remember that each one of us has the potential to make a big impact on this world, like Mr. Johnny did, like Mr. Tim Cook is doing. And as we proceed further with this webinar, we should realize that we each hold the power to shape our own future and achieve extraordinary things. And Taiwan, with its high quality education and a welcoming job market for international students, Taiwan is just the perfect place to make these possibilities a reality. So that is all for my opening today. Thank you everyone for listening. And on this note, let us begin our webinar.